Hey friends, welcome to another How to Produce and Sound Like You live stream. Today I'm going to be showing you a powerful tool for more unique and captivating rhythmic landscapes that I bet you wish you knew before. It's a secret behind a lot of the Afro house you hear, a technique that causes a lot of confusion, especially when we're talking about polymeters. And also it's a technique that many people don't understand or know how it's created. So the goal of today's video is to walk you through, show you how to do that. And I guarantee if you are writing loop-based music, copying and pasting loops, this will improve your tracks, variations, and interest. So stick around, I'll explain what I'm doing along the way. My goal is to motivate you to give this a go and to help you learn how to produce and sound like yourself. Feel free to drop any questions you have in the chat. I'll do my best to answer them. And of course, do let us know how you're doing, where you're tuned in from, and say hello. So without further ado, let's dive in. Chavi Diaz, a very good afternoon to you. Nice to see you first there in the chat. And as always, thank you for your support. So today, the cheat code, as I call it, how to produce and sound like you. Cheat codes, one way of describing ways that we can kind of learn and investigate so we can start taking and making our music more unique, more distinct, less random, less lucky that we got a good idea, and more, well, we kind of know a bit more about what we're doing and therefore we make sure we have a good idea. So last week in the live stream, I broke down polymeters. I showed you how to make them in Ableton Live in a DAW, the simple way, and I kind of showed you the benefits of what they can bring to your tracks. So I will drop a card somewhere around here, and also at the end of the video I would say a very strong suggestion, if you haven't seen that video about polymeters, so go and watch that. As today we're digging into polyrhythms, that kind of poly family, but the other poly. And believe it or not, there is a lot of confusion out there about polymeters and polyrhythms, with many people often confusing them. And once you understand a bit about them, it kind of makes sense how they can be confused. I guess my goal is to try and help you overcome that by simplifying it and making it easy to understand. If I read the definition here of a polyrhythm, that's often where the confusion can start. Definitions are pretty complicated by themselves. Polyrhythm is a musical concept that refers to the simultaneous combination of contrasting rhythms in a composition. This means that multiple rhythms, often with different time signatures, pulse rates, or accentuations, are played together to create a rich and complex rhythmical texture. That's the kind of description of a polyrhythm. And if we scroll down a little bit on this copy description that I have here that I'm reading from, polyrhythms can be found in various genres, including African music. I think that's a great reference to understand polyrhythm, particularly when we look at Afro house and African music and having different drummers playing at different times together, all unified as one, but all playing different patterns and time, rhythmical timings. Also jazz music, metal music, classical music, and here we are in electronic music. So if we go straight to the meat and potatoes, overall a polyrhythm is a powerful tool for composers and musicians to create a unique and captivating rhythmic landscape, adding depth and nuance to their music. That's what we really want from learning this exercise. So I'm going to close up my description, just kind of a quick test of my levels. Hopefully the microphone's already fine. I do pre-test all of this, but I'm just going to double check. Let's have a little bit of music. So that all looks good and checks out my end. The limiter is here on the master track again, just to give us a little bit of a boost in volume if we need with the musical elements. So let's start with polyrhythms, and let's start with so let's say also that I'm working in Ableton Live 12. Let's say you're working in Ableton Live 11. Let's look at how we can do it in both those versions in case you are in the previous 11 and you've not moved on to 12, because I think in 12 there's a faster way to do it, and 11 there's also a good way to do it, but again I will demonstrate that so you have that in case you're using that. Thank you, Chavi Diaz, for letting me know it's all sounding good. So let's start with a MIDI track, and let's start with a MIDI clip, and we could use the metronome, but I think let's have something like a kick pattern as the metronome. So I'm not going to change our global time signature. I'm going to keep that at 4/4. I'm also going to bring our tempo down. I'm kind of thinking the music that I'll make today, maybe a little bit Afro housey then, a little bit of a melodic kind of Afro house idea perhaps. So I'm going to bring the BPM down to sort of say 123 perhaps. What I'm going to look for is just a bit of a sample, perhaps a kick of some sort. And let's actually pop up in the search bar up here, kick as well, Command F or Control F, depending on your operating system. All right, let's get in here. Let's go backwards a bit there. So yeah, just a bit of a sampled kick. So I think I might just I quite like that one. So let's have this one down into our MIDI track. We're just going to use one of the kicks from this loop here, and we're just going to program in a nice simple 4 on the floor pattern. So that's going to be our rhythm that we recognize, nice and easy. And that's going to be the first of our rhythms, right? The first rhythm we have is a kick drum confirming the pulse of 4/4, which is the time signature we're working in. And if you ever want to learn a bit about time signatures, the first number is how many of the pulse. So in this case, it's four lots of quarter notes, that being the pulse. And that's how we understand we're in 4/4. So we've accented here all of the quarter notes with a beat, so therefore we have that 4 on the floor, classic time signature and classic pulse. So that's the rhythm that we're going to use as our metronome. And then on the next track, we're going to then start with a polyrhythm of some sort. Now, probably where most people begin with a polyrhythm would be in terms of understanding triplets. And ever since I've been working in Ableton, there's been the option to change the grid directly into a triplet grid. So what does that mean? If we sort of, let's say for starters, we've got over here in the top right corner 16th notes here showing up over here, that the grid is currently divided up by 16th notes. So if I use on a Mac Command 1, you can see I'm going down in beat divisions or grid divisions, and if I go Command 2, I'm going up in divisions. Instead of clicking with the mouse up here, nice and fast, 1 and 2 move you up and down in grid size. Let's say we're in 8th notes then, right? And if we look at between the first beat here, so this is either 1 quarter note, 2 8th notes, or if we make it a 16th grid, 4 16ths, right? That's how we can divide this. And if we keep going, we're dividing in numbers of multiples of 2s and 4s, etc. 2, 4, 8, etc. Multiples of 2, let's say. So if we come back to 8th notes, we've just got 2 in here currently, right? If we go in between, or 1 quarter note, as I said. So if we already use, since Ableton has it since a very long time, a triplet, we can do over here, you could change and ask for the triplet grid. But much faster than that is if you learn this sequence again, Command 3, you'll now notice that the grid has changed to eighth triplets. And what does that mean? Well, now we see 3 notes in the space of where we just saw before only 2, right? So we're now dividing, instead of in multiples of 2, we're talking in a language of multiples of 3, right? So let's say we fill up all those eighth notes with triplets, and we start by getting some sort of sounds here. And let's maybe also make it pretty clear from the beginning here that you don't need to only make polyrhythms in drums, but it might be a nice place to start to get a feel for this rhythm against this rhythm. But bass lines, vocals, melodies, chord progressions, it's all fair game for a polyrhythm. And if I say polymeter, do feel free to correct me in the chat, because sometimes even just the words can overlap without you meaning to. Today, polyrhythm, rhythm, that's what we're doing. Hey, Normal Norman, he's back in the chat. Good to see you there. 357, yes, they are some great numbers there. So if we're looking at Normal Norman, he just wrote in the chat 3, 5, and 7. Well, 3s are triplets, 5s are what we call quintuplets, and 7s are septuplets. So I'm going to stick pretty much to those exact numbers as well today as our counter number to the 4. So we've got this 4 on the floor with our kick drum, and we're going to interplay with other polyrhythms with other timing to get that. So let's get something that we can use for that. Maybe just like a drum rack here that has some percussion in it. I'm going to drop that onto that blank MIDI track. And I'm just going to move my notes down now to some sort of sound in here. Let's turn on the preview so we can kind of hear what's going to happen as we go up and down. Okay, that could be nice, that kind of like bongo-ish sort of sound we've got here. So if we hit play on scene 1 now, I do need to remind myself, by the way, to keep this open, otherwise my webcam doesn't kind of work where it needs to work. So I want you to also think about like call and response conversations. That's what's really going on in African drumming. There's really a nice conversation often between different drummers playing. One person's concentrating there, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, and someone else is doing 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and it all comes together in this kind of beautiful conversation of rhythms. Now the key difference here to take away in a polyrhythm versus a polymeter, which we looked at last week, is I won't be changing the length of my MIDI clip. So that's the big takeaway here, is a polyrhythm is 2 different rhythms playing against each other, but they're happening in the same amount of time, in the same meter, a phrase, 1 bar here, the 2 meters work against. So the kick drum is a 1 bar loop of 4 beats, and the percussion now is a 1 bar clip of 12 beats, right? So we can count them if we like. We know we've got 6 here plus 6. So there's a little bit of maths going on here. We've got 12, right? And that happened because we put this in the triplet grid. Okay, now the key, we're going to look at some advanced ways we can work on this as well and spice it up a bit. First of all, I would always make my, as I'm not playing this on a MIDI controller at the moment, I would absolutely use the live 11 or 12 tools to randomize the velocity a bit, and I'd back that off a little bit. So we've got some vibe already there as well with velocity. Then what we could also do is pick out some of the accents, like these hits here, and we could have a conversation with something else in the track, right? So perhaps we choose this sound to have some of the hits. Sorry. There we go. So that's quite nice, right? So, you know, you can already start to think about spicing things up by changing, having a drum rack like this and moving some of the notes around between different sounds. Again, we could So that sounds quite interesting. We could then sort of look at splitting some of these notes if we wished as well, to go a little bit in more detail. So I'll go into that in a little bit more as we start to sort of get into these and kind of go a little bit further. But I could click on this note here and I could basically go ahead and split it, wrong control there, like so. And now we could also have, so already what was a simple triplet, 1/8 triplet pattern, has become something quite interesting already. We might use this later, we might change the drum rack, we might look for some other sounds, but that's already kind of interesting. Again, the velocity, that's just standard for me. Splitting notes like this becomes something to elevate it. We could also duplicate the clip over, so we've got kind of 2 bars of it. And then what we could do here is actually start to shift it all over to the left or the right and create a really interesting kind of shift in the pattern, so that the accents where the hits are happening are now in a different position, which I actually prefer to what I just had, right? So we can expand our creativity, and I want to sort of show you that today. Sometimes the basic building blocks, we can go back in time and we can kind of elevate it quite far by getting our thinking caps on. So I'm going to actually move that clip down, and I'm just going to call that triplets, and it's kind of already in a nice pattern. So I'm going to actually turn this back to how it began, so we can keep this kind of straight standard, and we can refer back to it, right? So I'm just going to put my triplets in again. So that's our very basic, no velocity, no imagination, but it is a triplet, and we get that feel. I'm actually going to label this a bit more so I understand what I think of it. So at the very basic, we've got kind of something interesting there. All right, let's now look at, again, if we're working in 11 and 12, what are some of the options we can do as we start to go further in here to, you know, quintuplets, septuplets? How do we do those? How can we do them efficiently? Normal Norman, it becomes hypnotic, exactly. Odd loop length can help too. Yeah, but watch out for that one, because obviously here today I'm teaching, so I'm trying to make this very, very simple. But odd length, loop length, then we start to talk polymeters again, right? The loop length fixed with different rhythms is a polyrhythm. Loop length changing with a polyrhythm can actually start to be a polyrhythm becoming a polymeter, okay? And that's where a lot of the confusion happens, because actually the two can overlap. But if you want to learn a polyrhythm, it all happens in the same space of time, right? So we're going to, in our 1 bar, get rid of the triplets. We're going to turn off the triplet grid, so we've just got 8th notes showing up here, and I'm going to use Command 2 to make it quarter notes. So we're going to have, well, actually I'll do the Ableton Live 11 wave first. Let's do that first. So I'll go back to, say, smaller beat division. So let's come down to, let's say, maybe 16ths. We'll go to my percussion hit here, and this time I'm looking to have, in the space of where 4/16ths happen, I'd like to have 5. Okay, so what we need to do that in the world of 11, and we can do it in 12, is we put in 5/16ths and an extra. Okay, the extra's there, the 6/16th is just there for a bit of a guide for us. And then what we're going to do is click on the note here. So we've selected them all together. Can turn off my pencil tool. And it's this little gray little marker up here that becomes really, really valuable. Again, that many people sleep on, as it's what I'm going to use then to then drag all of these notes over. And you can see now in the space of where there was 4 notes a moment ago, there are now 5/16ths. So we now have quintuplets, as it's called. And I can kind of leave this note here the extra or delete it, because now I can just duplicate that pattern across, and now I have 5. Remembering again that in the same way that I made these cool triplets, I'm not going to leave it typically like that. I'm going to copy it down, and I would start again. Let's give it the same color as the other one. I'd start again to randomize the velocity. So we've got this. Now it's still quite fast, it's in 16th notes, so it's a rapid kind of pulse, but we could start by kind of removing some divisions here. So maybe we do something like this. So that's kind of cool, right? And again, if we want, we can bring some others back in variety. And we can again move those to other sounds in our rack. Or move a different division. This is just a simple drum rack, by the way, from Ableton Live. So I might change that one to a different hit, perhaps this one actually. And right now, what we haven't done as well is we haven't started to mix different polyrhythms. So what do I mean by that? Well, in one polymeter here, sorry, I said it, polymeter, that's my first. So if there's a tip jar, maybe I should put €1 every time I say polymeter in the tip jar. So right now we've just got 5 quintuplets all over here, but we could have quintuplets mixed with triplets, mixed with straight notes, right? So again, I want you to think, always expanding your thoughts, be as creative, be as wild as you can imagine, because right here we've got an interesting quintuplet pattern. We've muted some notes, we've got other notes playing, we've got velocity randomized, we're moving through different samples. That's kind of all cool, but maybe this could be some triplets with some quintuplets with some straight notes, and then we've got something super wild, right? So again, interesting, right? So we've got our basic triplets up here, our fast kind of quintuplets, but obviously, yeah, I'm not super happy with the other sounds in this rack for the conversation, so I'd probably just leave everything down at the moment. Something like that. But you know, I can make another rack in a moment with some more interesting sounds to have a different conversation with them. And the triplets, I like it. Okay, so another one. Well, let's actually take a quick look then at how we could have done. So we know the triplet workflow of the triplet grid is the same really in 12 and 11. There is no differences there. So you could just simply turn that on with Control or Command 3 to turn on and off the triplet grids. So again, it's good to learn those shortcuts because they make life a lot easier for adjusting the grid in the background here instead of going in here and clicking and choosing. I haven't used that for quite some years, I think. Also Command 4, if you learn that one, it turns the grid off and then back on again. So all of those are very useful. So 8th triplets, or the triplet grid, same in 11, same in 12. The way I just made the quintuplets with using the gray marker to drag the notes to fit the 5 in where there's normally 4, same in 11 and 12. I think the difference that you have in 12 is if we make a new MIDI clip and we put the clip at, let's say, all the way out to either quarter notes or half notes. Let's say it's even 1 bar. Okay, so we just put 1 note here. The difference is that we can actually drag up. So if we now make the grid, let's say down to quarters or halves, if we do Command E, you could see it splits the notes automatically. And then if I do hold Command down and E, I can use my up arrows to start splitting it. And so if we play this clip, so you can see I'm just using 1 whole note and then I'm chopping it up using the command held with 1 finger, the E held with another, and then I'm using my up and down arrows to change that. So in real time you get this lovely feeling of that rhythm. So there's the triplets. There's a normal 4/16. Now we have quintuplets. Double the triplets, so 6. And then 7, but 7 very fast beats as we've gone down a lot in the beat division. So just wanted to point that out. That's the difference in 12, is that you can actually work in a way where you have you know, more control about slicing the notes up and doing it that way instead of dragging it around. So whatever you prefer, but you can start with a whole note here. We can also Command J and join all those notes back up again. Command E to cut them into the grid. So Command E slices them to the grid size, and then Command held, E held, and the up arrow, and then we start chopping the notes by the amounts here that you can see. So we've got 3 notes, 4 notes, 5 notes. That's pretty handy as far as I'm concerned, because it means you can do that in actually a faster, more efficient way if you wish. All right, so back to the last division we're going to do. So let's copy this down, call it 7, and we're going to pop into here. So thanks Normal Norman before for the 3-5-7 suggestion. I mean, that was what I was planning to do all along as well. So maybe we'll do 8th notes here. Well, we'll stay with 16th. That's fine. So once again, we're going to be looking at where we can put 4/16. We'd like to put 7 instead, so they would be divided by septuplets. So 3 triplets, 5 quintuplets, 7 septuplets. So we need 5, 6, 7, and then 8 once again, if we're doing this, especially in 11, because we're going to need to follow that. And then we're going to select all the notes together and then drag our little grey marker up here all the way across, using that last one as our sort of compass. And now we've managed to fit in this space 7/16 notes, right? And now we can copy that all the way across, and now we're going to have a very fast pattern, which again sounds a bit strange. Perhaps what we can do, as I said, for the 7ths, is we'll copy a clip down and we'll do 7s, but we'll do 8th notes instead. So let's say 7 8th notes. Hope you're finding this interesting, by the way. This is, as I said, ways to learn how to produce and sound like you, how to get distinct, how to get unique in your sound in Ableton Live, how to kind of start thinking, okay, I always do this, perhaps I'll try that, how not to sound, you know, super vanilla, how to sort of start thinking a little bit more about how you can get your own unique sounds happening, or on the other side, also not just random accidents. You're actually planning for things to sound a certain way because you understand how to do it. Right, so let's say we change to 8ths. This time we go, so we can just get the number that we need in here of 8th notes, right? And then we're going to bring it across to fit in the space of where we normally would have had 4/8 notes, right? And now we've got ourselves again 7. And once again, we can copy and duplicate that over. So let's have our kick drum. So it doesn't have to be 7/16, right? It can be 7/8 notes. It can be 7/4 notes, etc., etc. So you also have that you can play around with and change the beat division as well, right? So I think out of that is a polyrhythm. The two ways you can do it in 11 and 12. What it can bring to the music, this kind of fun off kind of feeling or conversation. These are the ones with no velocity and no change between samples. Let's make this one a bit more interesting. So let's try another rack on here, because this one is, as I said, one of Ableton's default world drum and percussion drum racks. I've bookmarked a few that I like, but I also did make some over the years, and there's one I think with quite a lot of percussion hits in it. So let's try having a look for that one maybe. This one, as you can see, I've filled up a lot of pads here with percussion sounds, so it should give us a few more options. So let's say for a moment we mute this one up here, or we bring it down. And let's try and find our anchor sound. What do we want as the main one? That's cool. Let's maybe try then moving. So there's lots and lots of choices in here, right? And that's the other thing as well, is that, you know, we can play around with all of these muting and unmuting. So if you were talking to me, if you were one of my artists that I'm coaching, we could be looking at this clip here that we've currently got just here. Let's drag it down a little bit. And we could say, let's make a bunch of variations of that. And we could go from this meter to, you know, another clip where we have more elements unmuted. We could also change the sounds that it's going to play. So it would be easy to come up with more sections of our track, different energies, different interest within this one clip. Norman, that's a very clever way of doing that. I'm going to see if I can do that in Logic. Nice. Well, happy to show you something that hopefully you find, interesting and helpful to you, beneficial. So I think this is great for coming up with variations, like I said, you know, of a theme. So we've got this percussion loop, and then we turn it into percussion loops. I'm still quite drawn by this triplet one that I shifted the timing on as well, so don't forget that. It's not that I changed the loop length, it's that I moved the accenting of the notes across, so it more changed where the hits happen and where the velocity of the pattern changes. So again, this could be multiple variations of this, so we could turn this back as well down and put the whole pattern back how it was. So that would be quite subtle. So this is the 2 to the 1 that I quite like. So that would be another arrangement change right there as we move along. Sometimes I'll mute the first hits as well where they are going to overlap a kick to give myself some space in that area. So these are where my kicks are happening, right? On all of the strong beats in 4/4. So I'm kind of playing around those beats. So we've got a few things to choose from. Now I'm starting to really enjoy this one. I think this one and the 5, the quintuplets, are my 2 favorites. I think I'll roll with this one for now for my kind of track idea for today. So what I might do, so it's not too confusing, let's say over here is all the polyrhythms. Check my spelling here. Let's drag that over, and then I'm going to have a new MIDI track, or actually we can just duplicate this track as it's got the rack on it, bring that across. Call this one the perk, and then I'm going to essentially remove everything except for the one that I'm kind of feeling at the moment for the musical idea for today. And then if I duplicate this one down, so we've got a variation of it, and we can take away the 5 now. We know it's the quintuplet polyrhythm, right? It's 5 against 4, and these are the notes that I've brought into play in my 5 against 4. And the sound I chose. Let's have a look at where that sound is, which pad it's on. Here. Let's have a look at it. Maybe a bit of ADSR action. Just to shorten up the volume envelope a little bit. Push the attack back, let the kick come through there, maybe a bit of random panning on this sound. Nice. The release of the sound as well. It's going to sound super nice with some delay. What about if I pitch it up or down? Quite digging 4 semitones. So now we're starting to cook. Just using one sound in this case, one percussion sound with that nice kind of rhythm on it. So if I have my copy down here, for example, we could make a change in this one. What about if we stitch these two notes together? Nice, so just that little bit of new notes in there. We've got a B to the A or a 2 to the 1 so that we can go up in energy later in the track with our quintuplet polyrhythm over here. So maybe we could try another polyrhythm and see if we can go polyrhythm crazy in our track today with something like the bass or a melodic idea or something like that in the future. So if you've got any questions about polyrhythms or what I have just done, what I've just displayed, if you're here in the live stream, do drop us a comment in the chat, like Normal Norman, Chavi Diaz, good afternoon to you both. If you're there, feel free to ask a question in the chat. I don't mind going back and explaining something that I've done, but hopefully this has all made sense and it's kind of like, you know, the way I've shown you, you can follow along and understand. All right, so we're in Ableton Live. We're now going to build out a little bit of an idea here, musical idea. Let's maybe have a bass line. We might see about whether we do it in triplets, using the triplet polyrhythm, but let's just get a sound going for starters. We might have like a bit of an operator bass today. And what sort of scale are we going to be in today for our musical idea? Maybe a minor scale, I think. Could be C minor. B minor's a nice one. G minor's nice. What sort of emotion are we going for? We also have B flat minor. Maybe a little bit edgy. We could also have F sharp minor. There's a lot of black keys in F sharp minor. Okay, so we're looking at an F as a root note. So let's have like a simple kind of rolling bass, as we would call it. Something like this. Let's have kind of 4 bars of that. We're up very high here, so let's come down, get it on the root note. One thing I will do actually, as this percussion sound that I've ended up using in this rack here, it is quite musical. By that I mean I repitched it 4 semitones already, and it has like a real kind of music tone to my ear. So let's just see if we can kind of understand what its pitch is, perhaps. Let's see if we can figure that out. So we're getting almost a D sharp here. So let's tune that down into a D sharp. And then we're just going to check, do we have a D sharp in our F minor? We do. How about that? Actually, we don't. So that's the reason why I'm kind of doing this, right? To have a little bit of a look. We have a D and a C4, C sharp 4. So we could pitch this percussion 1 semitone less, and now we should have a D. So that was just a way to make sure it's in scale. Now that I sort of put my bass line into F sharp minor. So hopefully you followed that along there, what I just did. But as this percussion does have a real pitch to it, I think it's a good idea to tune it into a scale. And the D in the F sharp minor happens to be which interval of the scale? It's the 6th. Could probably even go to the C#3 to get a 5th. That could sound even a little bit smoother with everything else rather than the 6. Let's maybe just try that as well, see what that sounds like. So yeah, I think I prefer it there on a 5th in the scale. It's going to sound a little bit more glued at that point. The 6 is a bit more tense. 5 is a little less tense. And now I'm going to work on this bass line sound a bit. Let's make the bass nice and short. Pop back to our percussion, check the envelope on that. That's still our quintuplet, just adding a little bit of changing the volume envelope, shortening the note lengths a little bit, just so it tucks in and around the bass line. Gold Music Vault, great stream. You should do more Ableton tutorial vids. Thank you very much, Gold Music. I guess there are a lot of content and videos on my channel. The idea I was trying out here, I mean, let me know if it's interesting or not, was to do a lot of in real time kind of work, therefore sort of more live streams than short form video. Of course, it takes more time and patience to join me and watch if you want to watch in real time, but it's kind of showing you how this can all happen in real time without a script and a plan and, you know, an edited and polished video. It's just kind of happening in the moment. Sometimes it sounds good, sometimes not. That's all part of the real world and the real life. So that's kind of the idea a little bit here on the channel. And I want to help as many of you as I can learn how to produce and sound like yourself, these distinct ideas and unique ideas that are going to make your music stand out. When I'm listening to the Beatport chart and I hear, oh, that person's really trying to, you know, do something a bit different there. That's a lot of the goals here. Thank you, Gold Music. Yeah, I just wanted to explain that because that's kind of a little bit of the idea here, just to kind of share it in a different way. I have ideas for some short form videos as well to do when something comes into mind that I can do in a much shorter period of time. A little bit of glitchiness on top of the bass line here. Let's have a look at the filter of the bass. Nice. So we've got a nice simple operator bass with a little bit of raw, adding a little bit of texture on the top. Let's get this percussion sound a little bit more sexier than it currently is. We know we've got a clip 2, which is what? Just a little bit of a extra couple of notes. Let's tweak the velocity on those a little bit. That's better. Let's get some reverb and delay a little bit onto this percussion sound as well, so it sort of gets into a nice bit of space. It's very in your face and very kind of dry sounding. That's better. Get it out there into the space a little bit more. And now just the reverb. Maybe later, just like this, a little bit of echo. Just a tiny bit, just to push it out wide here, get a little bit of spatialness in it. Get the bass in the center, get that percussion out wide, and I might turn off then the random panning I set earlier in the simpler here. Sorry, just checking into the chat here. Gold Music Vault, I have one question. What do you think about AI to master your tracks? Well, interesting. I'm still somebody who would go through a person. AI, I think, obviously does a pretty good job, very similar to how we could do perhaps in our computer with lots of plugins in the box. But I think where a human, a person who's a trained master engineer, they have, again, that human touch, the understanding of what you were trying to do inside your project when it passes their ears. You can ask them questions about things that you've done in the mix, and they can give you feedback. Maybe they have a beautiful studio with analog compressors and EQs and things that they can put your track that you've made in your computer, all with plugins, all digital, all quite perfect sounding. They can run that through a bunch of hardware that adds little bits of color and warmth and things to it. So I'm afraid for me, AI is good for AI mastering. I think is good for testing your own in-the-box masters against, and obviously it can give you a benchmark, try and make your own personal rough masters or masters better than it can do. But in terms of algorithms and moving sliders, I want a little louder, a little bit more bass and things like that. It's still quite formulaic, the results. So for me, people, I have a great master engineer that I could recommend, and I've learned a lot from him. It's like getting your hair cut or having a good mechanic, somebody that you trust with your art and your music, and they understand what you're trying to do, and they're able to do that, and if anything, also even improve it, so you get a track back that you're already happy with, but just like wowed by some little detail they did, a correction or some color or something. So I hope that's helpful, but that's my opinion for what it's worth on that. I'm coming very much from the camp of I'm not burying my head in the sand about technology and AI. It's here and it's here to stay, and it will be a force. But I think we have to understand what we can do that makes our art and things special, and then combine it with the technology. It's not for me a direct replacement, if that also helps. Okay, so let's maybe have a little think about, let's see this bass line. For example, if we were to run the triplets pattern on it, this is the very basic triplet bass that I did earlier, the polyrhythm, the triple polyrhythm. So let's have that note. Let's randomize it a bit. So we've got a 3 against a 5 against a 4 if we were to do that, right? Let's try another. I have a cooler triplet clip because that was the very basic triplet clip. Then I made another triplet clip which was a little bit different. I moved some of the notes up in pitch. We'd also need to get these in scale if we were using that pitch change. So let's try this out as a melody. So, sorry, as a bass melody. So let's say we bring this down into key. Let's switch on the scale over here. We're in F sharp minor at the moment. Select all the notes. Let's get them down to, actually, let's see up here, there's a bit of an issue. We want F sharp and we want minor up there on the global. Now we can get things in shape. Okay, so let's pop that there. Okay. Quite interesting. Let's select all those notes. Sorry, wrong move there. Bring it up an octave. Let's maybe make the B the A, which is the third. So interesting is a different kind of bass line, you know, that's a triplet bass now playing against a 5 polyrhythm in the percussion against a 4 in the kick, which was our meter 4/4 time signature. So that's what determined anything else against our 4/4 kick is the polyrhythm. The perk is a quintuplet polyrhythm, and now this is just a rough idea, but it's a triplet bass line playing against that 5 and against the 4 of the kick. I think I would change the bass sound though, as the bass sound I'd already made to work well with the rolling bass. So if we have another MIDI track and we bring the triplet bass over to that, let's just try with another synth. We'll make a new kind of melodic techno type bass line sound over on this track with the triplet pattern instead. Just see what it sounds like. We'll make a decision in a moment. Gold Music Vault, cheers. That was a very quality answer. You're very welcome, my friend. Thank you for your comments, and great to have you on board here in this Ableton Live Sunday stream where we are cheat codes for House and Techno. Today, polyrhythms. Last week, polymeters. I really suggest if you haven't seen that stream, check that out. Again, I explained the simple way to make a polymeter in your Ableton Live DAW. You can also do that in Logic, Cubase, Pro Tools. GYLP2, polyrhythms should be the next level in music. Yeah, definitely sounds so much more interesting. I'm absolutely with you. This is what we're trying to do on this channel here. We're trying to help you how to produce and sound like you. And, you know, the other day, I have to be honest, there's a post, a bit of a rant coming from me soon on my Instagram channel. If you fancy following me there, it's Heath Home Music, about the Beatport Top 100. As I listened in there about a week or so ago, and all I heard was copies, rip-offs, and formulas all day long. There was about 10 tracks out of 100 that were original sounding or interesting sound design or music or chords or something. Not just grabbing a very famous track from the 90s or early 2000s and bringing it up to a modern spec. Of course, those edits, I'm a DJ, those are great to have sometimes, an edit of an old track brought up to modern spec and play it with more fatter modern drums and bass lines and a freshen up. But I think we've got to wake up a little bit that with the emergence of AI, for example, and the force that that's going to be, if we don't start thinking a little bit about making our own art and focusing more on that, AI is going to do those edits and rip-offs and copies better than we can. If you want a reference of that, go and check out a yacht rock version of Metallica's Sandman that ended up on Instagram. I mean, yeah, I think copies, it's easy for AI to do what you want to try and do, or we want to try and do as a community and artists and producers, is concentrate a bit more on this kind of making our music more interesting and our fans happy, and our story as an artist and our music that gives our community and our listeners the emotion we want them to feel, all that kind of thing. So yeah, love Tools, highly recommend. Listen is a heavy metal band. Okay, not quite sure I understood that, but you can maybe elaborate a little bit in a moment. So over here, I was going to try, over here, sorry. So let's just see if we can. So I'm just trying out I'm trying here the triplet polyrhythm that I did earlier, turning it into a bass line. So it was originally demonstrated on the percussion. I've moved the MIDI across here, and I'm now just trying to write or create a patch, a wavetable synth to sound a bit nicer with this triplet bass, and then we can decide, are we keeping the rolling bass we had a moment ago, or we're going for a triplet bass, which gives us a 3 against a 5 against a 4. So we've got polyrhythm party starting to happen here if we keep this one. Let's just balance the volumes of that a little bit. Maybe we keep the polyrhythm bass line, right? As we then have a 3 against a 5 against a 4. So we really are starting to get a polyrhythm party happening here. So if I make this a bit clear what's going on, because the rolling bass, my friend over here, I do like that style of a bass line. It sounds great, but we can do that quite simply many times and repeat it over and over. It's not a breaking technique or anything. This is a little bit more spicy. So let's call this the triplet bass. And this is then going to be a wavetable bass. And it's a bit more unusual. We'll bring that over by the kick. So we now have and we could have maybe a variation of this as well. Yeah, that's the original timing of the triplet bass. So let's just switch these around. Clip 1, clip 2, so we have a variation as well. And it just shifts the rhythm slightly. It's still a triplet polyrhythm, but I've just looped it a bit longer and moved the accenting of the clip over to the left. Okay, just checking with the comments. It's a little bit, few comments today, which is great. Gold Music Vault. My biggest stumbling block in music production is knowing how to use audio effects. How did you learn how to use all of these? Yeah, that's a great question. To be honest, there is no kind of shortcutting the truth about time, right? Spending time, hours, messing around with Ableton Live and all the effects. And it is a bit daunting, right? When we sort of go and look at the audio effects category over here, we open it up and we see all of these options here. There's an awful lot there, aren't there, to sort of work your way through, and you can sort of think of them on their own, and then you can think of them in combinations as well, where they all sound lovely together, right? What I would recommend for you to do is to start like making a dedicated day, evening, afternoon, morning of the week, where you're not really trying to make a track, so to speak. You're more just taking these effects and putting them on a synth sound or onto a drum sound or something like that, and just playing around with it and starting to understand what it does and how it changes that, and with the goal of maybe obviously learning how to use that, but also maybe finding some favorite combinations if you put more than one together, and then saving that in the project or over here in your user library, making yourself a new folder over here in the browser of Ableton, clicking on user library, opening up this area here, right clicking, making a new folder, and then calling it, you know, audio effects. And then you're going to save into that folder combinations or an adjusted audio effect. So for example, if you're over here with the percussion and this echo and this hybrid reverb that you've adjusted to sound a certain way you really like, well, we could easily put those two together, shift and select them both, group them in a little rack like this, and we could even name it, you know, something like chain one or whatever, it's your language, and then we could just drag that rack over and drop that in that folder, and then we would have that in the future to drag into any project or anything we're working on. So that's a little tip there. I mean, that can go very deep very fast, but you can start with something like a workflow like that. Okay, I'm just going to empty that and delete that out the way just so I don't by accident yeah, keep it there and then not understand why I did that. Okay. I'm also just going to try this bass clip. So I've just shortened the notes just to make it again fit around the kick a little bit better. Let's copy it down. It should actually be 2, right? Because it's different. Let's make sure I have got a copy here that's matching. And then 2 should be a bit different, which it is. Timing and note length. So now on this one, I'm also going to play around with muting the notes where the kick falls. Maybe we have the 2. Could try this one as well. Yeah, so again, it's not too tricky here to get some nice variations happening where you can dig in here. I'm just making space for the bass to fit around the kick. It's going to add up to a bigger, stronger, more powerful mix, and it still sounds nice, but they're now sort of again having a conversation, and that's a lot of what's going on here. This is a conversation between the bass and the percussion. And then we've got our kick conversation. So let's now maybe bring a hi-hat into the mix here. Let's have a one shot. Maybe this one that kind of popped up there. Let's grab that, drop that in here, and let's have a simple offbeat hi-hat for the moment. Up on the C3 note, the original pitch. So in here. This is also going to sound nice because again, we're back in our polyrhythm. Well, this is just a straight 4/4 normal straight notes, nothing fancy going on, but of course it's interplaying with everything else. So Maybe a clap, or claps even, could be nice. Maybe we can get a nice organic crunchy clap in here. That's a great idea. I've only ever used, sorry, just checking in on the chat again, Gold Music Vault, that's a great idea. I've only ever used them while trying to make tracks. Yeah, I think that's the key. Separate it to a sound design session where you just, the goal is to learn those, try to come up with combinations, save them, and then when you're starting future projects, then you can go straight in and use some of those tools that you've built for yourself. I was following a tutorial yesterday, and this guy put 3 of the same audio effects on one track and tweaked different parameters on each of the effects. All 3 were echoes, if I recall correctly. Interesting. Well, sure. I mean, there's no rules in a lot of these things. I'd have to hear that and see that example, but it's absolutely fair game. From what I'm reading, that could well and truly make sense. But yeah, as I said, I'd have to hear that to understand what it sounds like, of course. So we're going to clear hi-hat search. We're now going to look for clap instead. Looking forward to 12.1, by the way, as 12.1, the update, all of the claps that you have in your own personal sample library will show up when you do a search like this, clap one shot, alongside all of the claps that come with Ableton Live. So therefore, the ones that I have showing here, I've added manually myself, editing tags, but in 12.1, the tags in Ableton Live are automatic. Let's have the track playing so we can preview a bit. Okay, maybe this clap. Let's make it Command G to group it. Let's put it in a little rack because we might layer it with some other claps. Actually, I like this one. Drag that down into there. Also, I like that one. Let's maybe try an Afro clap pattern. Like, Afro claps can often be sort of like a lot like reggaeton, but we're not making reggaeton, but we've sort of the doom da doom cha doom da doom cha doom da doom cha, that kind of rhythm. So if we're thinking about that kind of rhythm, doom, let's turn off a few of these. Okay, let's try that. Okay, I'm going to remove these. I'm going to start with this layer, change my mind a little bit, and then I'm going to see if there are other layers I want to add to this. It's quite nice. And there's a real trick here to layering sound. So if you notice here, what I was doing was moving the sample start point around and the end point of the sample. And what I'm kind of doing is deciding that this top layer, this one we're looking at, is giving me more or less the transient I like, the beginning of the clap. And this new one that I've just added here, you've noticed that I've moved the sample point away, giving space, so I'm not using the front of this clap. This is going to provide that. And this second clap, I like the kind of body of it. And you can always blow this up here if you wish to sort of dial it in even closer. And you can also look at the little line, the wiggling line of the sample here, and where it's more or less in the straight line with this straight line that's in the background, one of these points, it's called a a crossover point, kind of where I am here. The little point lines up with that straight line. We don't tend to get a pop and a click. It's a way to kind of get that really, really nice so that it's not going to get a nasty little click there. So when you're layering drums, don't just slap them on top of each other. Kind of think about what role they're going to play. And I can go into this in more detail in the future, but there's a real science to layering sounds so they work well. Also, I can bring the volume down of the second clap all the way to the bottom. So we're only listening to clap 1, and then bring the other one slowly in till it's doing what I want it to do. A little bit of tweaking, maybe one more if we can find. Let's try this one. Yeah, not quite. What I might try and do is look for a snare instead. Let's see if we make it a clap snare or a snare clap, as we say. So let's go Command F, drop in a snare up here. Let's play it so we're in real time again. Let me just clear this, start again, Command F, snare, one shot. Let's have a look in the sample library a little bit, one shot. There we go. Something noisy like that could be good. Well, it's pretty unique. Play around with the ADSR. So this is another way. He is very visual because you see the start and end point of the sample, but here I'm changing the shape of the envelope, only letting through the attack and the decay and the release. I'm controlling all of that to exactly what I want. I can also add color in here. Using the filter, so you can really sound design this little layer quite a lot. Same with the top clap, bit of ADSR. Just going backwards a little bit on my settings here. Yeah, I think I want it a bit more splashy like that. Let's get a compressor on this. Just going to check back in with the chat, ladies and gents. I haven't looked there for a little while. I could see there's a little bit more conversation happening there. DJ Norman, ghost claps help with the groove. Yeah, absolutely. It's very raw at the moment here. Just getting a layer type thing together, and then we absolutely could add a bit more groove to it. We also haven't added any velocity or humanization or anything like that as yet. So very raw sounding group of sounds. I also want to compress it and add a little bit of reverb as well. So pop a little bit of compression here. Quite an original clap loop because it's not following the typical pattern of the 2 and the 4. It's just adding a bit more kind of groove, if anything, to the elements we've got here. So if we knock off the bass for a second, we've got this really nice interplay between the 4 and the 5, the quintuplet polyrhythm. Today's theme is coming from the perc track. We do have a 2 bass comparison. We have a rolling bass. I do think this fits the best, but we did make another bass. We could put it to vote. That one's interesting. It's a polyrhythm. Also, it's a 3, it's a triplet. So we could have the triplet, the 3, the 5, and the 4 all going off in a polyrhythm party. But I kind of like this bass for the idea for today, I think. So I've changed my mind again. It does happen. This is all happening in real time, right? Right, let's see about some sort of musical elements now a little bit. Maybe a bit of a chord or something like that, chord progression. So we're building it up from kind of drums and bass today. Yeah, I'm with you, Norman, on the rolling. The other one was a nice idea, but for another track, I think. Try this pitch down as well. think that's quite nice. So we might have the percussion. So what I might do with that, let's bring this clip down a bit. I might just go back to what I had here, which was +2, 1 tuning here on the transposition of this percussion sound. What I'm going to do is going to pop into the envelopes of the clip here. I'm going to make one clip here, a transposition at +2, same rhythm, same pattern. Then we're going to copy that down here, and we're going to make this one down. I think it was -5 that I just had a second ago, so that's going to be tuned down. So we can make this one 2, nice little bit of variation happening, 3 different rhythms, so we might look at that again later, but that's an alternative rhythm that we have. Let's have maybe one more drum track that I've got in my head while I'm thinking of it. So maybe a fast 16th shaker. It's clear over here. Command F, shaker. Helps if you don't have a J in between the A and the K. Shaker. There we go. I don't want loop actually, I want one shot. So once we write the chords, we probably have a bass, rolling bass still, but we might have it with a movement to it. And I'm thinking something, whether it's going to be 4 bars or 8, but moving from, maybe we have the 2 instead of the 1. 2 to the 4, and maybe the 6, and then down to the 5. I think that's the chords I'm going to play. Let's have a little listen to that. Something like that maybe, but maybe stretched out a little bit further. So let's play around with that. By the way, if you're here at the live stream, do say hello. We are learning. I'm trying to help as many of you ladies and gents out there learn how to produce and sound like yourself, like you. And we're exploring cheat codes, things that are kind of ways to learn and understand, not relying so much on luck, but learning these techniques so that we can kind of get our own unique and distinct sound by combining theory, polyrhythms, polymeters, learning some of these techniques that can really take your music and make it sound like your own, not like everybody else. Rolling, nice. I've recently got into modular drum sounds. They're fantastic. Yeah, modular drum sounds are great for the weird and wonderful, for sure. Definitely. All right, let's see if we've got some action here with the MIDI controller. Probably helps if you switch it on. Let's try that. Wait for it to boot up a bit. There we go. So, it sounds a bit very, very high. Let's get it down from there. We don't also want that happening, so just a quick adjustment. That's better. That's the kind of movement I'm thinking. Probably one take is good enough. Let's do a capture, and then we'll just have a look at what we've got here. So there's all the chords in the capture MIDI. Let's just move the start of the notes to the start of a bar here. We can bring them all the way to the 1, and then we can loop this up. So we've got ourselves all the way to 8 bars. Now, whether we need to quantize it a lot or not will be a question in a moment, but we do want to make sure the start of the notes don't fall outside of the 1, otherwise we won't hear the beginning of the notes. So we can bring all of these and make sure they butt up there. I'm somebody that will quantize when need be, but for example, just to point out little things like this, that's okay. You know, there's no need to worry about that. As I said, what you do need to be careful of is that you don't have notes that go in front of the 1, as we won't hear that beginning of the chord, also the end of the notes and also the start of the next ones. So maybe this one here, I might bring a little bit closer to here. Let's have a listen. Okay. Also, we want to just bring our playhead so that it does start right from the very beginning there. Okay. Yes, so definitely these guys, I'm going to just manually bring them over. Again, that means I keep this kind of almost strumming, as we would say, but it's happened by me playing it. Let's check that again then. Maybe a little bit closer here. I like the blend there. We could also revoice these. By that I mean, let's copy this down. We'll take a look at that. We could smooth this out a little bit. So anywhere where there's a jump, we could bring the notes so that mutually these two notes play in the same position, playing the same note, but they're in different positions. So currently the A is the top note of chord 1, but it's the middle note of chord 2. So if we were to invert the C on the top here, we revoice the chord, and now we have common top note, and we actually have a common middle note in the same position of the chords. That means a smoother voicing. We can see that the A, again, is shared between chord 2 and 3. So again, we could actually invert the top 2 notes down like this, and now again we have actually glue here all the way along, and we also glue the bottom of these 2 chords together in the same position. So that means strong voicing. Now here we don't share any notes at all, so we could revoice it, inverting the B and the D, and we could also change the voicing a bit so that they do share a common note. But let's just have a listen to that. I think I like the velocity on this second chord up a little bit, so I'm just going to bring all the notes up a wee bit. Back to the top. So we now have 2 chords, one voiced originally, played, and second voicing. Nice for, again, somewhere else in the track. Try out the higher perk. Also works. A bit of housekeeping. if we were to copy over the pad track to the bass line and look at the chords, just the root note to the chords, like this, we could also have our rolling bass follow this progression, right? So we could bring this in to there, duplicate it, and have a rolling root note bass to the chord. So it's going to give us another variation. We'll hear what this sounds like in a moment. So let's just set it up. It's going out of time there, so to do a bit better job here of highlighting exactly the right space. Okay, let's zoom in a bit, have a little look. Again, I'm not trying to make it too perfect, kind of leaving some of the little different note lengths and little bits and pieces, so it's got kind of a bit of uniqueness. You can see it's drifting out a little bit there, but can kind of bring that back. But it's keeping a little bit of uniqueness to it, which should add up to it sounding a little bit unique. And if we need to, we can always quantize it and tidy that up if it's a bit too much. So not worried about that. Kind of trying to keep some of the vibe of what happened up in the chords into actually the bass as well. Okay, nearly there. And then we just want the G. Oh, don't want to move it all the way over there. Just want to bring it over to there. Again, just watch that you're copying it between the right lines so that you can duplicate it across and get what you're after. All right, let's try that. Okay, so it's way too high, so we also need to bring those chords down into the bass area. So what were we playing before? F sharp 1. So we need to get these guys down into the 1 area. Could be also interesting in the 2 as a different sounding bass as well. Too low, yeah, okay. So let's stop that for a second. Go back up an octave. Okay. So let's play this all together so that we get the timing of that working with the chords. So these 3 would go together. Let's copy these elements down as well. Okay, let's have a look at the pad itself. nice things to automate. A bit of auto pan. I'll just go for slow movement here. And watch out for the auto pan, because it does actually dig quite hard into the volume of whatever you're running it through. So I definitely would have a compressor here to make that up a little bit, glue everything together. But before I do that as well, what I was actually hearing was some sidechain compression in here off the kick drum. So let's say we switch all this off, but let's have a bit of sidechain action here to get some more movement into this pad. Let's have a listen to the kick. So that's one idea. Actually gave me another idea as well. Another idea, B, A, C, D, while it's flowing. Let's also have a gate, not the gated delay, wrong effect. Let's grab a gate. All right. Spinning wheel of, you know what that spells. So while it's doing that, I'm just gonna have a sip of water. All right, let's get the gate effect instead. And let's maybe even try some of these polyrhythms. Let's get them back into play, maybe the basic ones, as a pattern for the gate, and see what happens with that. Could be interesting. So let's say we're going to sidechain, and we're going to come from the polyrhythms track, which is this one over here. I'm going to remove the percussion rack from there. We're not using that anymore. And I'm just going to put a synthesizer here. We're not going to listen to the synth, but it's going to drive the gate. So we're just going to switch that track off, click the pad, and now we've got something happening in the gate. Gate's going to also listen then to the polyrhythms. Let's turn up the polyrhythm track. Once something's playing, there we go. Need to set this up a little bit better. Nearly. Alright, so to explain what happened there and what I just did was I kind of revisited the polyrhythms from the very start of today. We did a 3 against 4. We did a... just get that set up better. We did a 5 against 4. But all of these polyrhythms here, they have no velocity and no kind of imagination. They were just purely just to show the sequence of notes. Same with the sevenths. But then I started to make some changes. So we had quintuplets, quintuplets, and triplets over here. All the orange clips were without any automation, any changes. Then I started to arrange them a bit differently, also split notes and show how we could use our imagination to kind of expand those septuplets, quintuplets, and triplets, our polyrhythms, and make them even more interesting. We still only scraped the surface of that. And then a 5 quintuplet here with some notes muted and unmuted. So I thought I'd just revisit that. And so what I've just done is revisited a septuplet. So 7 notes, 7 eighth notes in the space of where there's normally 4. And use that as the source of a gate, which is now clamped onto the chords that I wrote or played on this pad sound, and it's quite cool. And we could use that as a variation or as a, it could just be the sound design of that sound, or it could be something we switch on and gate them in the break and then they come off, or gate them at the peak of the song, but then we have the normal pads without the gates during the breakdown. So some nice ideas, I think. So I do need my polyrhythm track on, so that needs to be switched on and the clip needs to be playing. So one of the clips, let's make sure I know which one it is. Yeah, it's definitely this one. So I'm going to bring that up to the very top and I'm going to call that the gate MIDI, which is what it is. And this polyrhythm track, let's maybe make a duplicate of it. Then we can get rid of all this stuff on here. And just call this gate MIDI. And we could write more MIDI patterns as well for the gate to trigger it a certain way, but I thought it was kind of cool to use the sevenths, the septuplets gated pattern that we had over here from the original polyrhythms to do that work. And it's just an operator on the track. If we do adjust the operator a little bit, it does change the behavior of the gate a little bit. with or the gate, with the gate or without the gate. Maybe we can vote on that. I'm not sure what you prefer out there. It's definitely more rhythmic with the gate, and it's now 7 against 5 against 4. Definitely got some preferences already about some of these variations. Maybe one more clip here with the traditional 2 and 4, so we could jump to that as well if we wish. So maybe we make that the 1 variation, and the Afro kind of clap. Use in another part of the track. A pitch envelope on the bass line to give it some nice sort of punch. All right, let's have a play between these. I like the pad no gates. Okay, thanks Norman. Well, you know, we have either or option. I think it could be nice in the track somewhere as a variation, but I also like it both ways as well. That is the gate and with and without. But we have that as an option there, nice and easy. And all we need to do actually is we can leave everything switched on just on the pad. We can turn the gate off. So we're just going to do a very quick recap here. Today was all about learning about polyrhythms, how to kind of do them easily, how to break them down simply, and make them, how to not confuse them with polymeters, which we did last week in last week's live stream. So I will put a link to that at the end today, and I would suggest you check that out if you haven't already seen it. And in that video live stream, I make music as well, and I break down polymeters and how to simply do them in your DAW, especially in Ableton Live. This is, I also showed with the polyrhythm how you can do it in 11 if you don't have 12. If you do have Ableton 12, then I showed you an even faster way where you can kind of set the grid to, for example, quarter notes or whole notes, and then just slice the note until you get the right amount of divisions to fit. Where originally, for example, if we're in 16th notes, maybe there was originally 4 16th notes within one beat. One quarter note adds up to 4 16ths. We made triplets in there, so we had 3 notes fitting in there. We made quintuplets, so we had 5 notes fitting in that same space. And then we made septuplets, which we had 7th notes fitting in that space. And I want you to think about polyrhythms. The key to those is the phrase length. The measure, the bar, it doesn't change. 2 bars, 3 bars, 4 bars. We don't shorten the bar length. We don't lengthen it. That's polymeters. Polyrhythms, we stick to our pulse, our phrase, our measure, and the 2 rhythms interplay with each other, or not even, doesn't only have to be 2, but the rhythms interplay with each other. So we get things like 3 against 4, 2 against 3, 5 against 4, 7 against 4. And we've got all of that happening in here today, or pretty much all of those different polyrhythms. End result, something a little bit more unique, bit different, bit interesting. Great technique, I think, to get out of the sort of vanilla kind of sounding stuff and experiment, play around with it, try it out. It also doesn't have rules. It can be on a bass line, on a vocal, on a melody, on an arpeggio, on chords, polyrhythms. They don't have to be on drums, but using them on drums can be a good way to learn. So let's have a little listen to what we've got in the end. We've just got these two scenes made up of a kick, a clap, a layered clap, a simple kick, a percussion sound that is all about the pattern in here, which is a quintuplet. There were 5 notes where normally lives 4, and then I've muted some notes to try and make it a little bit more interesting. Simple offbeat hi-hat, simple 16th shaker pattern over here. And then I played in some chords on my MIDI keyboard, a nice sort of pad sound here, and messed around with using one of the septuplets as the gate of the pads, just for an interesting idea. But let's have a little play, and then we're going to call it a wrap for today. Chord 2, a bit stronger still on the velocity. Maybe not that strong though. With the gate. If I don't use the gate, I would go back to also what I was going to do, which is add sidechain and movement through sidechain compression. Auto pan. Glue compression. And we switch that rack off. It's very static. might back it off a bit. But it's noticeable it's gone. Yeah, those bass following the chords doesn't work yet. It would need a little bit of massaging to get it to work. The single pulsing bass on the F sharp root note is a lot better for my ear. Then we'd probably be looking for a little bit of a motif or something on the very top of this. Something that's for another day though, a little stream idea. If you'd like to see this track continue to evolve and turn into a project, do let me know. Happy to save it and continue working on it. I think it's a nice little idea for a couple of hours of streaming in real time, no script. What we have is what we have from today's efforts. So as always, great to see all the energy in the chat today. Lots of questions, good questions as well. Norman, great to have had you on board. If you're still there, Gold Music Vault, thank you for your questions. GYLP2, also the same to you. And Chavi Diaz, of course, as always, thank you very much for your support. Much appreciated for checking that everything was working from your end at the very, very start of today's video. So on that note, it is going to be an over and out sayonara. Thank you very much for this Sunday. I will, as I said, put a link to a video that I strongly suggest. If you've enjoyed this one, you will enjoy that as well. I think Polymeter Party is the one to go and check it out. If you haven't seen last week's live stream, then you're all up to date with how to do the 2 polys in Ableton Live in electronic music, House to Techno, and I'm going to keep sharing with you these cheat codes, the things that you can focus on, you can learn and find your way to how to produce and sound like you. So thank you very much. Chavi Diaz, nice music. Thank you very much. Norman, thumbs up to you as well. Take care of yourselves. Enjoy the rest of your weekend. And if you haven't, like, commented and subscribe. Well, if you've enjoyed the comment on the video, if you enjoyed the content on the video, also if you'd like, leave a comment on the video. All your support's much appreciated. Perhaps you can share this to a friend who would also enjoy watching the video and learn plenty from it. It all helps the channel grow, and then we can get this message out to more people and help them make better music as well. All right, take care of yourselves. Bye for now. Ciao.